The mail-order bride never came, so the cowboy tracked the wagon wreckage and found her barely. The message came at sunrise, carried by a dust-stained rider who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Luke Carver was tightening the cinch on his bay horse when the man staggered toward him, clutching a folded slip of paper like it might burn him if he let go. Luke caught it before it hit the dirt, and even before he opened it. He felt his chest tighten, as though someone had looped a rope around his ribs and pulled. It was the handwriting, thin, shaky, desperate. He had memorized every curve of those letters from the 6 months of correspondence that kept him alive through drought, loneliness, and the kind of rancher's grief no one talked about. He opened the paper. The wagon never came. Left St. Louis on schedule. Attacked 3 days out. Survivors missing. Check the trail north of Dry Creek. Judge Hale. Luke didn't realize he had stopped breathing until the world went white around the edges. He rubbed the note between his fingers as if friction could change the words. The mail-order bride he had waited for, paid for, prayed for, dreamed about, was gone. Florence May Bennett, schoolteacher, 24. Woman who wrote with a gentleness he thought didn't exist in the West. A woman who told him she wasn't afraid of hard work or loneliness, or the idea of loving a man she'd never met if he treated her with kindness. A woman who told him she'd lost everything except hope. And in her letters she began to sign her name with something steadier each time. Your future wife, Florence. He had lost 2 fiancés before. One to winter fever, one to an outlaw's stray bullet. He didn't believe in third chances. Yet Florence's letters almost forced him to. They felt like a hand reaching into a life he'd begun to think wasn't worth saving. Now she was missing. Maybe dead. Luke's jaw locked until it ached. Where was the wreckage found? 4 miles north of the old pines, the rider rasped. No bodies. Just torn canvas, busted wheels, blood in the dirt. Folks say wolves scattered what the outlaws didn't finish. Luke's stomach twisted, but he nodded, mounted, and kicked his horse hard enough to leave a spray of dust behind him. The trail north of Dry Creek wasn't a place people rode for fun. Even in daylight, the trees leaned in like watchers with rotten breath. Wagon tracks veered off the main road in erratic zigzags as though the horses had bolted in panic. Broken crates, torn dresses, shattered glass bottles, and an overturned trunk lay scattered across the ground. He knelt and touched a frayed strip of pale fabric caught on a branch. It was soft, finer than most women traveled with. He pressed it to his nose. Lavender, faint but unmistakable. Florence. Luke swallowed hard against the burn crawling up his throat. Then he froze. A footprint. Small, bare, dragged. He followed it for 10 feet before it ended at a smear of blood on a fallen log. He stood very still, listening. The wind hissed. Leaves whispered. Something, a memory, a warning, a feeling, told him not to turn back. He had lived in these lands his whole life. He knew the difference between the silence of nature and the silence of danger. He found more tracks, larger ones. Now, men. 3 of them at least, heavy, careless, unconcerned about being followed. But the smaller drag mark, the one that could only belong to one person, kept going. Luke's heartbeat started to pound. He walked faster, then jogged, then ran. He found a ripped scrap of corset whalebone, a broken button, a bit of torn letter he had once written her, smeared with dirt. He wiped it gently. The ink blurred, but he recognized the words. I won't ever raise my voice at you. You've had enough cruelty for a lifetime. He felt something inside him break open like a cracked seed. He found blood next. Thin droplets at first, then a wider arc on rocks. A smudge on bark. A palm print on the ground that looked like someone had fallen to their knees. His breath hitched. Florence, he whispered into the trees. Please be alive. The forest answered with a low growl. His hand slid to the butt of his revolver as he backed up. 2 wolves slinked out from behind a cluster of pines, eyes bright with hunger. Not rabid, not reckless, just determined. And behind them, half hidden in shadow, lay something pale in the grass. Something that made Luke's stomach lurch so violently he nearly dropped his gun. He didn't remember firing the first shot. Or the second. He only remembered running, shoving past the bodies of the wolves, sliding on damp needles and dropping to his knees beside what he thought was a body. It wasn't a woman. It was a dress. Florence's dress, ripped at the seams, spread across the ground like a broken flower. Under it lay a trail of blood leading deeper into the woods. She had escaped the wolves, or they'd been scared off by something worse. Luke closed his eyes for one trembling second. When he opened them, all softness was gone. He followed the blood. The trees grew denser, the ground softer, the air colder. The path narrowed until it was barely the width of his shoulders. Then he heard it, faint, ragged breathing. Not an animal. A human trying to stay silent. He pushed branches aside and froze. Florence lay half-covered in leaves at the base of a split boulder. Her hair clung to her face in muddy strands. Her lips were blue. Her hands were tied in front of her with frayed rope soaked through with blood. Her skirt was torn nearly to ribbons, and purple bruises mottled her ribs like fingerprints pressed too hard. Her eyes fluttered open. "Luke," she whispered, voice thin as a thread. "Are you real?" He sank to his knees so fast the rocks scraped his shins. "I'm real. You're safe now. I've got you." "No, you don't understand." She tried to sit up but winced sharply. "They're still here. The men who took the wagon. They didn't leave. They said they'd come back for me." "Let them try," Luke growled. "They won't leave this forest alive." Before she could answer, a twig snapped behind him. He turned, gun drawn. 3 shadows moved between the trees. Florence's breath hitched in terror. "Luke," she whispered, "run." But Luke Carver didn't run. He stood shielding her with his body, ready to kill or die. The first outlaw stepped into the light with a smile carved into his face like a scar. "Well, look at that," the man drawled. The cowboy found himself a prize. "Guess we'll have to take her back." Florence's fingers dug weakly into Luke's boot. "Please, don't let them." "I won't," he whispered. Then the outlaws reached for their guns, and the forest exploded. Gunfire shattered the quiet so violently that birds burst from the treetops in a panicked cloud. Luke shoved Florence behind the boulder, returning fire so fast and sharp his knuckles burned. Bark splintered near his cheek. A bullet grazed his sleeve. He ignored it. One outlaw dropped first, clutching his shoulder with a surprised grunt before collapsing into the underbrush. The other 2 ducked behind a rotted log, firing blindly toward Luke's position. He counted their shots. 1, 2, 3. A pause. Reload time. Luke bolted sideways, rolled behind a stump, and aimed. He hit the second outlaw square in the thigh. The man screamed, fell, and crawled backward, trailing blood. The third one snarled. "You're dead, cowboy," he charged. Luke didn't have time to lift his weapon. The outlaw barreled into him, sending both men crashing to the ground. They rolled, fists flying, grabbing at each other's clothes, elbows slamming into ribs. The outlaw was huge, heavier, meaner, fueled by something wild. He punched Luke hard enough to make stars burst behind Luke's eyes. But Luke had something the outlaw didn't. He had a reason to live. With a roar, Luke twisted his hip, slammed his knee into the man's stomach, and wrestled his gun free. The outlaw grabbed the barrel, trying to wrench it away. Luke bit back a groan as pain shot through his arm. He pushed harder until the barrel pointed under the outlaw's jaw. "Don't," the man rasped. "Please." Luke pulled the trigger. The man dropped limp. Silence poured back into the forest like water filling a hollow. Luke staggered to his feet, breathing hard, vision swimming. "Florence," he called. "Here," she whispered faintly. He ran to her. She was curled under the boulder, trembling. Her wrists were bleeding where the rope had rubbed them raw. Luke tore the rope off carefully, his hands shaking with a fury he didn't try to hide. "They hurt you?" he asked softly. Florence swallowed. Not the worst of what they wanted. "I fought, I kicked, I bit one. They said I'd pay for it when they came back." Luke's jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "They won't hurt you ever." She reached up weakly and touched the edge of his coat as if testing whether he was flesh or dream. "I didn't think you'd come. I thought you'd forget me when I didn't arrive." "I tracked you across hell itself," Luke whispered. "I'd track you through 1,000 more." She blinked fast, tears mixing with dirt on her cheeks. "I'm sorry I lost the letters. They ripped my bags apart. I tried to save them. It doesn't matter. You're here." She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Luke caught her instantly, lifting her without effort. She gasped softly as his arms closed around her. But she didn't resist. She folded her face into his neck, shaking. "I thought I'd die," she whispered. "I prayed someone would find me before they came back." Luke held her closer, one arm under her knees, the other arm wrapped firmly around her back. "I found you," he said. "That's all that matters now." But the danger wasn't gone. The second outlaw, the one shot in the thigh, was gone, dragging himself somewhere. Luke scanned the trees. Something metallic flashed in the distance. A knife, a gun? He didn't wait to find out. He lifted Florence higher and moved swiftly through the forest, keeping to shadows, listening for pursuit. She clung to him, her fingers curling into his shirt like she was afraid he'd vanish if she let go. "You're safe," he murmured when she whimpered softly. "I won't let anyone take you again." Her breath hitched. "Luke, they said they took other women from the wagon too. They separated us." I heard screams. I heard... She broke off, shaking violently. Luke pressed his forehead to hers for one brief anchoring second. "Don't think about that right now. You're alive and we're getting you out." They reached a clearing where Luke had tied his horse. The mare snorted nervously, smelling blood on both of them. Luke set Florence gently in the saddle, careful not to jostle her wounds. "I can't ride," she whispered. "I'll fall." "You won't." He climbed up behind her, one arm anchoring her securely, the other holding the reins. As they rode, Florence leaned back against him, her head resting on his shoulder. The warmth of her breath on his skin sent something fierce and protective burning through his chest. Halfway down the trail, she whispered, "Luke, why did you come? You don't even know me yet." He tightened his arm around her. "I knew enough. But what if I wasn't what you hoped for?" He let out a shaky breath. "Florence, I didn't hope for perfect. I hoped for someone who wanted a life with me more than she wanted an escape from the world. Someone kind, someone brave. Your letters told me every piece of that. And today, you proved you're braver than any woman I've ever known." She swallowed hard. "And you're braver than any man I've ever prayed for." They rode in silence for a while. The forest faded behind them. The sun dipped low, staining the sky with orange fire. When they reached the broad valley before Luke's ranch, Florence stiffened slightly. "Luke, what if the townspeople talk? What if they say I'm cursed? That I brought trouble?" Her voice cracked. "What if they say you should send me back?" "Send you back where?" Luke murmured. "You don't have a home except the one you rode toward. And that's here, with me." Her breath trembled. "Do you mean that?" "Florence, I carried you out of a forest full of wolves and murderers. You think I'm going to let go of you now?" A soft noise escaped her, half sob, half relief. When they reached the ranch house, Luke lifted her from the saddle with both arms. She pressed her forehead to his chest, exhausted, barely conscious. He carried her inside, laid her gently on his bed, and covered her with blankets. She winced when he examined her ribs, her wrists, her bruises. But she didn't pull away. "Stay," she whispered when he stood to fetch more supplies. He brushed her cheek with the backs of his fingers. "I will." For the first time since he found her, she looked at him without fear. "Only trust." "Luke, if I hadn't made it, if you found only my dress?" Her voice wavered. "Would you have still wanted the marriage contract canceled?" He swallowed hard. "Florence, I didn't want a contract. I wanted you." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then, when I'm well, if you still want, I'd be honored to become your wife." Luke leaned down, resting his forehead against hers, his voice barely more than breath. "You already are," he whispered. "From the moment I saw your letters, from the moment I found your dress, from the moment I thought I lost you." Her fingers weakly curled into his shirt. "I'm glad you found me. I'd have followed the whole world to do it." Her tears slipped down her cheeks, and for the first time since the wreckage, she smiled, soft, fragile, but real. Outside, the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the ranch. Inside, Luke sat beside the bed, holding her hand, refusing to look away even for a second. He stayed awake through the night, watching her breathe, vowing silently that no one, no outlaw, no wolf, no force on earth would ever take her from him again. And by dawn, Florence opened her eyes, saw him still there, and whispered with a voice full of something deeper than hope, "My husband." Luke bowed his head, relief flooding him like rain on dry earth. "My wife," he murmured back. The past had tried to break them both, but the future belonged to them alone.